Hi, this is Steve Michelotti from the Azure Government Engineering team. I'm joined here today by Adam Wise, Program Manager of the Azure Cost Management team, and we're here to talk about Azure Cost Management on Azure Government. Welcome, Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
Now,
really great to be here.
I know that this is definitely an important topic for our government customers, because certainly in the government space, we're often talking about how we can spend taxpayer dollars more efficiently. So we're really happy to have you here to talk about Azure Cost Management. So why don't we just start out a little bit and tell us what is Azure Cost Management? What do we mean when we're talking about that?
Definitely. Cost management is a suite of tools that we've developed for our customers in order to allow you to kind of understand where your charges are coming from and then be able to go and manage those charges effectively from there. The way we think about cost management is there's kind of three different types of people who would like to use this. There's kind of the managers of organizations. So these are the people that we see as being kind of responsible for the budgets that are allocated towards them. The person who's kind of the owner of the bottom line of funds that's being allocated. The second type that we like to look at is finance type people. And these are the people who, they're responsible for allocating funds, creating these budgets, and working to enforce various teams to make sure that they're staying within their spending constraints. And then the third persona is the actual app teams and the developers that are using Azure. And the way we like to think about cost management from an organizational standpoint is that it should really be a kind of iterative process that everyone on all three of these personas within the organization, specifically, your organization within the government, is kind of continually engaging in this process. And so there's three main kind of functions within this process that we like to look at. The first being visibility. So that's thinking about, where are my charges coming from and understanding the disposition of that data with respect to what's accruing your costs and what's on your bill.
Right.
The second step being accountability. And so that's, I understand where my various charges are coming from, but how can I now make sure that the teams that are responsible for those charges are being held accountable and being kept within, a good amount of spending and not exceeding their costs and staying within budgets. And then the third being optimization. And so that looking at, how can I further reduce my costs, whether that's through taking advantage of Microsoft specific benefits that are offered, such as reserved instances, or making sure that you're using the proper sized VMs through right sizing.
I think having those three personas is really important, because the way that someone looks at it that's in charge of finance at the agency may be different than just a developer in the way they look at it. So the way we can surface that information to the three different groups, I think, is a really important point.
Definitely. And each person within that persona has a different take on the data, right, and a different approach and needs with respect to cost management.
Yeah.
So the first kind of thing we like to talk about is visibility. And so we have a couple of tools for you that allow you to gain more insight into where your costs are coming from. And so cost management provides you with the first tool being cost analysis. And this is a tool that allows you to kind of slice and dice your data to understand how it's tracking over time and where the charges are coming from. The second being our export tool. And that is a tool that allows you to schedule data dumps of your cost management data to a storage account, which you can then use at your leisure to import into your own systems and analyze on your own time. So those are kind of the tools at this point that we provide to allow you to increase your visibility into your charges. The next step being accountability. And the main feature for that we offer is Azure Budgets. And so that's a feature that allows you to set thresholds on your spending, and then you can get alerts as you're approaching those thresholds. And also, in more advanced situations, you can configure automation to kick off in response to thresholds being met.
Oh, automation, like I need to send a text or an email, something like that?
Text or an email, or you could also, in a more advanced situation, kick off a script to shut down VMs. So let's say, I have a 100 VM service running in the cloud, and I've hit my budget. I could configure a script to go and then shut down 50% of the VMs so that I am not accruing as much cost with that.
And you're in complete control of that. So if it's a dev environment, great. Not that you would shut down a bunch of production VMs without any warning, but you can complete control over what that automation might look like.
Exactly. And then the third aspect of cost management that is part of this continuous process being optimization. And for that, we recommend using the tool called Azure Advisor.
Okay. All right, great. So we talked about the personas, we talked about the different aspects that make this up. I think maybe this might be a good time to jump into a demo.
Awesome, yeah. Let me fire up the portal. Alrighty, so right here I am at the subscriptions list page, and so here you can kind of see a list of all of the various subscriptions that you have in Azure. So I'm going to select one particular subscription that we have for you. And here, if you've worked in the portal before, this is kind of the main page for your subscription where you can see various resources and now can utilize cost management. So the first tool I'll talk about today is cost analysis, and so that can be accessed from this subscription page. Before I jump into it further though, I want to explain a little bit about the concept of scopes, and that's a very important thing within cost management. And the idea of a scope is kind of what set of data am I looking at? So what set of charges do I want to be analyzing? And so in the context of a subscription, that would be a scope of data. All of the resources within that subscription are accruing towards the subscription scope. So if I go and I use cost analysis on this subscription, I can analyze all the charges in that subscription. And that would be useful for someone in all three of the personas that I mentioned earlier, but especially useful for someone on an app team who might be deploying resources and be directly responsible for managing that subscription. Cost management, though, also has higher level scopes that can be more applicable to these kind of management and finance personas that can also go and analyze data, but at a higher level to see how it's accruing across many different subscriptions, specifically, how their charges are accruing against their enrollment, for example. But yeah, let me jump into cost analysis specifically within the context of a subscription. So you click on the cost analysis blade within the context there, and let's give it a second to load. So here's the cost analysis experience. You can see here that the default experience is that it loads a chart that shows you how you're accumulating your costs over the course of the month. And it's overlaying it with a budget that I've actually gone and pre-created for this subscription. So you can see that I'm still under budget, but looking at this trend line, I may actually be on the course to exceed this budget. Another thing I want to note is that we have a couple of kind of easily accessible donut charts that allow you to kind of predetermine how costs are being allocated across various dimensions with respect to your costs. So you can see, which services are accumulating this cost within this subscription, or, where's the cost going in terms of where I've provisioned these resources. So you can see, for example, the majority of the cost here is coming from the main US Gov region, whereas it looks like a very small percentage is coming from the US Government Iowa region. And similarly, you can also break out resource group, and these are all toggleable for you and allow you to kind of change what you want to be grouping things on.
So if I'm just a developer on an app team, this is really useful information because it tells me, I may only work out of one or two subscriptions. I may work out of only one or two resource groups, and this helps me stay focused on what's important to my solution I'm building. I may not care about looking across 20 subscriptions because I'm not in charge of that. I just am responsible for my one little app that I'm building.
Exactly. Another great thing about this tool, along with kind of these pre-created charts here, is this chart here can be manipulated and changed as you see fit. So if I want to group all of my costs by a resource, for example, I could see which resources are taking up the most of the cost here. And you can see kind of a breakdown. So this test usage resource at the top has accrued $80.59 in costs over the course of the month. You can also filter as well within the context of this chart and change how you would like to view it, whether you want it to be a line graph, column graph, table, etc. Now, it looks like I might actually be exceeding this budget in the next upcoming days. So it might be useful to see how I'm tracking against that. A great way to look at that would be to change this from an accumulated view to a daily view. So if you look at that, you can see if I keep my current spending the way it is, my daily costs every day are actually exceeding my estimated budget per day. And so I'm going to need to make some changes before the end of the month if I want to stay within that budget. Another cool thing is, let's say I have decided I want to make some changes. We have an ability to show you a tabular view if you go and click this cost by resource, where you can go and see specifically what are all of the resources I have, what type of resource is it, and then what is the cost there. And so it could give you a really great way to quickly go and see where are all of my top spenders and how have they accumulated the cost to date.
Yeah, and I can see it's just sorted numerically, so I can see the most expensive on top.
Exactly. Yeah, so let's say you've gone and you've done some analysis in the portal and you decide that you want to go do some more analysis on your own within your own systems. That's where the exports tool comes into play. And so the way you can use that is directly from cost analysis. You can click this export button and then you can download the data that you have currently in this current view to a CSV, or you can actually go and schedule an export. So what an export allows you to do is you can create a kind of daily, weekly, or monthly time that it goes, gets all of your accumulated costs, and then dumps them out to a file. And then you can go do whatever you see fit with that data to kind of slice and dice and import it into your own systems so that you can kind of integrate it with your systems.
So literally any system I want to use, I can, because it's just exporting to a CSV.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So if you wanted to go create an export, you could just click add, and then you enter a name, and then you specify a storage account, and then you're off to the races. Exports is another great tool that you can use to greater enhance the ability for you to be able to analyze your cost data. Now, the third feature I'll go over, so I mentioned how I had overlaid a budget on top of that graph. I'm next going to discuss our budgets feature a little bit. So budgets is a great tool because it allows you to set a threshold at which you want your team to be accountable for their spending. And so, for example, I've gone in and I've created a budget here. This budget here was the one that I had overlaid on the chart. And you can see here that I'm 85% of the way there, and that, as we had seen through the tool earlier, I might want to change the way I'm spending things so that I don't exceed that budget. So I'll go ahead and click the add button just to show you, how you can go about configuring things. So in this particular case, I'll be adding a budget for this subscription that we've been looking at. Let's give that a second to load. Cool. So you want to always give your budget a great name, that's identifiable across, various teams, an amount, and then you can currently set a monthly, quarterly, or annual budget. A really cool thing about budgets too is that you have the ability to create an alert off of that budget. So, let's say I've set a budget for, I guess this particular one was for $1,000. And I can go and see how I'm tracking against that, but I also, through budgets, can be proactively notified when I'm approaching that budget. So let's say, for example, I wanted to create an alert when I had hit 90% of that budget threshold. I could go configure that within the Azure budget that I've created and then go send an email to myself.
So that's actually pretty cool. It's not that, don't alert me when it's been violated, alert me when I'm getting close. And let me decide what I mean when I'm getting close. Is it 90%? Is it 70%? Let me be in control of that. And that's exactly what it lets you do.
Exactly. And, being able to have some time in advance to make the needed changes so that you can stay within the budget is a really important thing for teams to be able to be kind of responsible with Azure. Another really cool thing that I had mentioned earlier, and I'll go into a little bit more detail now, is the ability to not only just send an email, but you can also kick off an action group within Azure when you hit this threshold. So for example, I've configured this 90% budget threshold. I could kick off an action group, for example, this one that I pre-configured, to go and shut down all the VMs. And in this case, I'm also sending an email to several different people. And so that's great because it allows you to implement automation in response to the budget. You're not only informing people as to, be knowledgeable that they're about to exceed the budget, but you can also go and take action directly in response to you exceeding that budget.
And I noticed that not only is it an email, but it says webhook there, which gives me an indication that if it's a webhook, I can write any code I want within the automation of the Azure infrastructure and to literally write code to do what I want in response to that event.
Exactly. And, action groups, you can configure a webhook, you could configure an email or a text message to get sent. You could also configure an Azure function as well. So those are just a few of the examples of what action groups offers in conjunction with budgets to, allow for you to really do whatever you want from an automation standpoint. going back to the budgets list page, here is more of kind of a read-only view of the state, but now that we've been through the creation process, you can see that there's a lot more kind of power behind that budget.
Absolutely. And you can see how you talk about the three main pillars being cost analysis, export, and budget, but they all three work together because they're working in conjunction. The cost analysis is analyzing against the budget, and so it's a really cohesive solution that way.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Okay. This has been Steve Michelotti with Adam Wise talking about Azure Cost Management on Azure Government. Thanks for watching.